Welcome to another episode of the Awakening the Warriors podcast. In studio is my friend and special guest, Jeannie Kidwell. She's here to be vulnerable and transparent, and she's going to tell us about being raised in a strict Christian household, to growing up and becoming a divorcee not once but 3 times, to surviving infidelity, and now she's navigating single womanhood as she's raising 3 amazing children. Jeannie, I'm so happy to have you in studio with me today. Welcome. I'm excited to hear about your story. And the other thing that Jeannie is going to emotionally share with us is when to recognize that it's time to leave a relationship and it's not worth staying simply for the sake of wanting to be in a relationship. Welcome, Jeannie. Thank you for being here. Let's get started.
Thank you. My name is Jeannie. I grew up here in Northern Virginia, actually right in Knoxville. So I've lived other places, but it calls me back. I was born and raised here. I have 3 kids. I have a first grader, a third grader, and a 5th grader.
Oh, man.
Yeah, and they are my entire life. I am divorced, and I've walked through quite a bit over the past couple of years and really throughout my life, and it's kind of taken me a few different routes. So Franny has asked me, knowing my story, knowing what I've been through, and she's been through some of it with me, has asked me to kind of be a little bit of a part of this, and it's really a pleasure and an honor to do it. And
well, I'm just happy to be here to bask in the beauty and the glow that Jeannie gives off. So hopefully a little bit of that will rub off on me. But one of the things I want to start talking about, Jeannie, is I know you shared that you were a divorcee. So I just want to, what I really would like you to just share a little bit from what I've heard and what I've read and the stories that I've been privy to and the conversations I've had with women. That is not an easy process to go through.
No.
So you've gone through that, and you're just tell us a little bit.
Well, let's say how many times I've gone through it.
Yes.
Because I think that's important, because a lot of women are judged on that, and we go, so I've been married and divorced 3 times.
So then, I appreciate you saying that, because in our society and in our culture, having to even share that you're right, it's enough to make us slink back into see it as a form of shame. And one of the things that we're doing is empowering each other to not dwell in the spaces that allow us to exist within shame. So thank you, Jeannie. And yes.
And then let's go a little further into that, right? I do have 3 kids, but I have 3 kids by 2 different fathers. Mm-hmm. So then it's like, I very much grew up in a Southern Baptist home, and in a very Christian home, which my parents don't judge me. I'm very grateful for it. But grew up in that judgment. Yeah. And so to say that is hard, right? That's hard.
Growing up Southern Baptist in and of itself comes with its own amount of experience that often leaves women, especially, feeling very judged, very shamed. So we could talk about that a little bit more. But I appreciate you sharing that. Yeah. Even in an environment that's very strict and rigid, as growing up in the Southern Baptist Christian home, your parents were very supportive.
Oh yes.
And then we'll talk a little bit about the blended families, because I don't know the statistics, but I could say 1 in a very small number of families are blended families.
Yes. And so I did come from a blended family, because my parents were also divorced. So I grew up with a stepdad, which it hurts my heart to even say, because he's been my dad since I was 4 and a half. My mom and stepdad got married when I was a couple of weeks after my 5th birthday. And he came into our lives when I was about 4 and a half. So, excuse me, I've been really lucky to have that, and at that point in time, because I'm not a spring chicken. I'm 42. I'll be really honest about that.
That sounds very spring chicken-y to me.
So at that point, it was 1983, and divorce really wasn't a thing, and women were really looked down on for that. So my mom carried a lot of that, and then to be in a Southern Baptist church where your parents are, you are a blended family. I mean, my dad couldn't be a deacon because,
he got divorced.
Yes.
Right.
So, I mean, there's a lot, and so you just sit there and you're like, okay, yeah, that's us,
Yeah.
And I didn't want that for my kids. I don't want that for my kids now, right? But I think the really cool part, I think the biggest thing that I am proud of is being a single mom of 3 kids. Like, I'm proud of that. There's a lot of pride that comes.
Yeah.
I don't say it shamefully. I say it very, very proudly, and I'm sure people are like, what's wrong with you? But it's like, no, you don't understand.
Right.
You don't understand. Like, it is. I'm doing this.
And so that's one of the beautiful things, Jeannie, about you, and I can't wait for everyone to hear why you can say that there's no packaging or no reasoning for that, but to help people to arrive at a place where they could say, you know what, I'm proud to be X, Y, and Z.
Yeah, and I think that really does come from my mom, right? Like, I think that comes from my mom and her mom, my grandmother being very, very independent, which was really weird for my grandmother.
For your grandmother. You just come from a family of trailblazing women, Jeannie.
Let me tell you, and then my grandmother's mother, so my great-grandmother also.
Wow.
I mean, I come from a line of it. And for me, in the same respect, I come from a long line of very strong men as well. So to kind of and where they support us and are proud of us for being those strong women.
Wow.
So, and for being independent, and we were allowed to be that way. I mean, everybody, if anybody spent longer than 5 minutes with me, they know. So.
Yes, I know. So, Jeannie, tell us a little bit about your journey. We could start with your first divorce and how that came about, or how that came to be, or what challenges you experienced in that marriage to allow you to arrive at that decision being the best one for your family.
So my first husband was my college sweetheart, and so so and of course I really the only person that I ever really dated, because in high school I did not date. I did not. First of all, boys got on my nerves, and so that's where it started. They got on my nerves. If you followed me around too much, I had things to do. Yeah, I had things to do.
You're so busy.
I had things to do. I had things to do, and that was kind of my attitude then. And I mean, I just like we talked about earlier. They have, those same boys that I went to high school with have come back to me as adults and been like, we were so intimidated by you. And I was like, that is so ridiculous. Like, why? But probably because if you followed me around too much, like, I just was like, why are you here? I mean.
Well, I think you make a very good point. And it's, one of the things I've had conversations about is like boys wanting girls to be their girlfriends, right? And following them around. And
I don't do that.
A girl saying no.
Yeah.
But then they kind of re-strategize, and having parents kind of telling them what to do to re-strategize rather than in the pursuit of the girl, rather than accepting that she said no.
Well, and I think that even as the daughter in the situation, the female in the situation, having your parents look at you and be like, your expectations are like here, and you're talking about a high school boy. Okay, like that was kind of, I was like, all right, so I should lower my standard because of his age? That's ridiculous to me. And that was my thought process, right? And so and I wasn't lowering anything. I did not want to be followed. I had things to do.
And you made that clear and plain, right?
I believed I did. I mean, I believed I communicated that effectively, but I said, why are you following me around? What are you doing here?
But how many teenage girls do you
none.
know?
And there are very few that would look at a boy that they even if they didn't like him, all the way would be like,
Yeah.
and I knew that I was different in that way, right? Like I wasn't because my friends, I would watch them get boyfriends and I was like, oh, I wish I could do that. But then I would get one, I'd be like, you're really getting on my nerves. Like, I don't want to do this anymore.
Yeah, and just being able to say that, Jeannie, and move on and be about things that you're interested in. And gone is the era. Well, I shouldn't say gone is the era where girls are still being conditioned to find that guy and find that man because that's what you're supposed to do.
And not to be Debbie Downer, because I don't want to be Debbie Downer, but I'm going to be like, and not to be cynical. Maybe cynical is a good way to say it. Look at the Hallmark movies. Everybody watching those Hallmark movies right now, and they're all the same thing, right? It's all the same. The strong, independent woman who doesn't have time because she's doing her thing.
Yeah.
And everybody thinks, oh, poor you. And magically, some dude shows up, and over the course of a week or two before Christmas, all of these wonderful things happen, and they fall in love and kiss at the end. That is not real life. Even though my dad tries to convince me that it is. Every year he's like, but that's me and your mom. I'm like, Dad, okay, I love you. That's not the way it works in real life. Like, and you can't base, not that I haven't, because I totally have, like I've fallen into that pit of basing because of something that I wanted to believe about someone so badly.
Yeah.
In the course of a very short amount of time.
And you know, Jeannie, that's so important. For me, like, I dated my husband, and I was in my 20s when I first dated my husband, and that's the only guy I've ever dated. So I can't speak to a lot of dating things, but we can't.
It's terrible. Dating is terrible.
Well, it was very exciting when we were doing it.
No, it's terrible.
Even now when him and I talk about it, I'm like, dude, your marketing campaign agent sucked. Mine worked overtime, so maybe that's why, you know what but it's in the dating where, you know, a lot of times it's, and we talked about this earlier, it's after you get into the relationship and after you get into the marriage.
Back those layers.
Oh, it was always there.
Yeah.
Whatever the thing that.
But you didn't see it at first because you didn't want to be that.
My marketing agent worked overtime, so I was blinded by it.
You didn't want to be that girl that was like, oh, I throw men away because one little thing comes up, right?
Yeah.
So you think, and this is a lot that has to do with conditioning, right?
Absolutely.
Not only that, but you know that you've made decisions in your past with people that you may not have want to be held against you.
Well, that's true, yeah.
And so you try to show that same grace and empathy towards that person. Well, if it's the wrong person, they're going to use that to manipulate you. And it's knowing the difference.
And it's knowing the difference. And unfortunately, like, that's the, you know, the environment in which, well, for these young ladies, especially in this era, thankfully, I will say, I have observed young women being as assertive as you've been now.
Yeah.
But I don't know if I've paid that much attention to notice that they were assertive then. I feel like the thing that I saw the most were young girls, especially in high school, even in college, wanted the attention. Wanted the attention from any guy as long as, you know, they were getting the attention.
Oh, yeah.
And so, you know.
And I've had those conversations with my daughter, right? Even though she's 7.
Yeah.
We have those conversations, and let me tell you what, she will look at a picture or something on TV and be like, Mom, she shouldn't be wearing that. She's showing her body. And I'm like, who are you, little girl? Like, and I know, and it's not that I'm all covered up, like, I'm not always in a turtleneck.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not always all covered up, but there is a certain way that I carry myself.
Yeah.
There's a certain way that I dress because, one, I like it, and two, because it's so hard because, you know, all of these things have come out where, you know, oh, only be this way, only be that way, do whatever you want, blah, 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 blah. Which is fine. If you dress however you are comfortable. But understand that it does give a message off. It does say something, and it does give attention, and you have to be able to negotiate that attention. And if you are not mature enough in order to handle that attention and to negotiate yourself through that attention, that becomes dangerous. And that's what I've tried to teach Charlotte. Like, that's really what I've tried to teach my daughter. You have to understand that there is a behavior that will happen to a visual. Just like women do the same thing. Listen, we do the same thing. Because you give me a beard and muscles and tattoos and you can forget it.
That's funny that you say
that. Oh my gosh.
Well, one of the things that I've actually been trying to tell my daughter, because it's you know what, Jeannie, that's such an important point, because in my growing up, that was shared with me a lot. A lot but I'm trying to teach my daughter that it's not her responsibility to carry the behavior or to make the behavior of a man who sees
It's not her responsibility.
It's not her responsibility at all, but that's not how I was taught.
Right.
I was taught it's my responsibility.
You're making him think those thoughts.
You're making him think those thoughts. And I think it's, then I wouldn't say it was a very irresponsible, but the burden and the psychological damage it does to our girls and to us, that message was passed on to us. And I think I almost started passing that on to them. I wouldn't say almost. I think I caught myself she was about 4 years old when I caught the level of conservatism that I was teaching her, which wasn't just conservatism, but it was packaged in you are responsible for. And then not only that, we sent her to a Christian school. Where
I attended those.
The uniform were requiring my 4-year-old daughter, 5-year-old, she was 14 when we took her out of that school, required her to wear her skirt almost at ankle length. And what that instilled the entire time
is that this should always be covered because it's shameful, right?
And
because it might make somebody else do something.
And it might, the fact that, so there was a period, even though my husband and I caught it at a very young age, more so, my husband was very different from me in that regard. He was like, Francis, let her wear whatever.
Right.
And then the school that she went to not only wanted to control the way she dressed within the school setting, but outside the school setting.
And that happened to me. That happened to me and my mom, which, like I told you before, I come from, my grandmother's French.
Yeah.
And her policy was, show you while you got it, because when you get old, don't nobody want to see it. And so that was her policy.
That's funny.
That's a huge contrast to being Southern Baptist, right?
Yeah.
Huge contrast to going to Christian school, where again, mine had to hit my knees.
Yeah.
Huge contrast. And so, because she wasn't allowed to hit my skirts,
Yeah.
because they would be halfway up my thigh, you know? Like, but I had a very unique twist there, where I was taught not to be ashamed of my body, to not be ashamed of sex or of my body or of any of those things, but to be conscious of the message that I send by how I carry myself, what I do, what I say, and all of those things, because there's a reaction to that.
It's so funny that you said that, because we were having that conversation at our house just the other day with our daughter. She is in her early 20s now, and she's now in the workforce, in the professional environment. And that literally comes into play. So as you're right. So we do have to have these conversations. And one of the things she shared with us, and I was trying to remember what my thoughts were when I was her age, entering the marketplace and being a professional.
I didn't think about it. Let me tell you what, I didn't think about it until, because I worked in male-dominated industries my entire career. Whether it was youth sports, which, I got to be in I wore leggings and a shirt all, that was just kind of, I loved that. It was amazing. Yeah. That's kind of my uniform now that I'm working from home. But then I stepped into a more conservative environment in the IT industry. And when you get into that, again, male dominated. And there were a lot of times where I sat in a conference room and I was the only female and surrounded by men. And I dressed conservatively. thank God for my professional parents and for understanding how to show up, right? You show up proper to work, these are the things that you wear. And I wore a suit to work every day, whether it was a skirt suit or a pantsuit. That's what I wore to work every day. It was, collared shirt, the whole, covered up.
Yeah.
But that didn't stop someone from backing me into an elevator. That didn't stop one of the executives there from doing that. And you stand there and you're like, what have I done to make you think that that's okay, or that I would receive that? And I remember I stood there, backed in that corner, and twice as big as me, and an executive, and I said, whatever you're going to do, you better go ahead and do it quickly, because when those doors open, it opens to the ground floor and everybody's there. And I stared him in his eyes and I did not back down from it. And he stared at me until he knew that it was getting ready to open. And I could feel the warmth of his body up against mine. That's how close he was. And he turned around and walked out of the elevator.
Jeannie, in the short time that we've spoken, we've just touched on some really massive issues. But harassment in the workplace, and going back real quick, like you say, you wore pantsuits, you wore skirt suits, and I, as you said that, I clearly recall like Hillary Clinton being vilified and bullied and made fun of by the media when she ran in one of her attempts to run for the office of presidency, because she wore pantsuits. Like,
that's normal.
When is it that women are, and then when women are going to be acknowledged for the value they bring to the workplace, and not be a eventual victim that gets backed up in the elevator.
Yeah.
Because, your parents invested in you, you went to school, you got your education, and just like my daughter was saying, like, in college, and what we were going to talk about that has gotten, like...
over there. We're over there.
It's really troubling that these are things that women who are in these male-dominated spaces have to deal with, on top of the fact that you are expected to perform above and beyond men and get paid less for it. And then not only that, but you also have to go home.
And keep in mind that when I first started in the IT industry, it would have been around 2004 or 5, which people probably think it would be, it's starting to progress, blah, blah, blah. Very, 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 very beginning, right? Yeah. You would think that, as I said, and I know you hate it when I say this, but I understood that I wasn't a desperate-looking woman, right? Like, I understood that. I looked in the mirror, I saw it, I got it, right? I also looked younger than being 26 or 27. I did nothing for that to be my truth. That just was my truth. I did not look my age, which now I look back at 26 and 27-year-olds at 42 and I'm like, oh, you're so cute, so it's ridiculous, but it's the truth, right? And so now I think a big part of it is, and when I spoke, I had a little bit of a southern accent. My personality is what it is. I wasn't super stern. I was willing to be warm and personable and all of those things. Well, to some people that's an open invitation, but it wasn't. I was just being nice to you. So now you're telling me that I need to be kind of rude and distant in order to be taken seriously. Well, then that I'm not being me, because I'm not like that. And so there was this really weird kind of dynamic that existed, and I didn't know what to do because I couldn't be myself, because if I was myself, then I was labeled as being flirty, or that's not at all. Other women would label me that way. It was like, no, actually, I was just taught to be accepting and kind and personable and warm. That's my personality. That's who I am.
Yeah.
But it wasn't... I struggled with that, and I hated being in the IT industry because of that, because I couldn't be me without those labels being placed on me. And it was really, now I don't care. And now that's become one of the biggest assets to the company that I work for and what I'm doing, because I'm in charge of our corporate culture. I'm in charge of recruiting and bringing people into our organization that are quality, and that warmness and that personability and that acceptance and that, hey, look, this isn't going to be a super starch thing, is now something that's welcoming to others and was what I wanted it to be to begin with.
I think that's pretty powerful, Jeannie, to kind of get to that place where you arrived at I don't care because this is how I'm going to be. I am a professional and I'm a woman. I'm going to embrace all those things. So like, what would you say to like my daughter, you know, a young woman entering the marketplace, and she was saying, you know, in college you get education to become the professional that you want to be.
But they don't tell you how to be a professional.
They don't tell you how to be a professional. And she said, you know, every day we wake up, I see sometimes girls wearing, or people wearing their pajamas or sweats, or, you know, you just wake up and you go to class, and then she's like, all of a sudden you graduate. And with my daughter, the week after she graduated from college, she landed a job in her field of study.
Right.
And
which
so,
is huge.
Yes.
That's a huge accomplishment.
That's a huge accomplishment. And so she actually, we had conversations about that too, because it's statistics. She was going by what the statistics said for
and she was scared to death.
Scared to death. So we went out. I remember even before she had gotten this job, we went out and we were buying clothes, and she wanted to buy shoes to reflect the level of professionalism that she wanted to take into the workplace. And even after she did that, she would come back and she was like, Mommy, I am really not even prepared.
Right.
For not just the dress, but like mentally and
oh yeah,
to navigate. And I remember we had a conversation just the other day, and she had to say something to one of her managers because they said something that was very damaging to women and women of color, and was very diminishing and dismissive of her humanity.
Right.
And so I you know, her dad and I said, you know, Tyler, we want to encourage you to learn to speak up. So we kind of like gave it some examples, and as she was walking out of the door, she was like, thank you so much. And then she just kind of whispered, she said, but I'm so scared.
Yeah.
So, and it's terrifying
Yes.
because she's just only 3 months into this. So Jeannie, like, what would you say to young women, my daughter or other girls who are now going into, how do you navigate preparing them for when that time comes where they feel like they are being backed up in the elevator, or they actually are being backed up in the elevator, in the bathroom, in the stairwell, in the conference meeting, when they show up early to facilitate whatever it is.
Yeah.
Because women bring value and it's evident, but unfortunately sometimes they get tasked with menial things. Thankfully we're seeing more and more, you know, women leaders taking their place in the space of leadership and as a resource. What are some of the things you would share?
I guess to kind of back it up a little bit, I went from being a program lead at a military installation, helping to run the youth sports program, to, which is a very different dynamic, still very male dominated.
Yes.
And then I transitioned into the IT world. I knew nothing about the IT world, legit nothing. And I attended as many meetings as I could.
Wow.
Because I sat in there and I was like, I have no idea what you people are talking about. And I kind of don't even care. I'm here because I need a job. And this is where, I mean, I moved from Colorado back here to home. Yeah. And I was like, and then I'm going through a divorce with my first husband, so that kind of brings back. And I was like, I have no idea what you people are talking about. I don't know what a rack is. I don't know. I understand conceptually what an infrastructure is. I don't know what a server is or why we are so concerned about them going down. Like, I was like zero knowledge.
No, that's awesome.
And then here I sit, cute little teeny tiny looking Jeannie with a little bit of a southern accent and sitting in a meeting with my suit on. And I honestly faked it. So I got pulled into another group where now I'm supporting an executive. More eyes on me. And I was panicking on the inside. Now I'm not in Maryland working in the office space that was like next to the data center, which I didn't even know what a data center was. Like I had no idea. I was like, what is that? Where is this mysterious place? Like, why are these racks of machines in there? Nobody cared. And I didn't think anybody else did, but apparently this is a huge deal, right?
Yeah.
And so now I'm working downtown, literally across the street from the White House. I was in an office, my own office that had a window. I was like, why am I here? What am I supposed to do now? And then there was problems on the project. And I was the one who was inadvertently being the truth teller. And it wasn't in favor of the decisions that were made by my executive and the executive that was there before him. And it was actually supporting what the client was claiming. And he said the only instructions that was given to take the information and to take all of the experience in the resumes that we had existing on the account and map it back to the job qualifications and job categories that the government had. Okay, that's pretty straightforward, right? Yeah. If it's apples to apples, great. If it's not, very little of it matched. So we were billing. Yeah, we were billing people and putting them in positions that didn't map back. So what the client was saying was right. And I was telling the truth. My executive said, send me this. He came into my office and yelled at me first. And I remember I slammed my hands down on my desk. I stood up and I said, I'm not lying. I'm not going to lie for you or for anyone else. This is facts. Mm-hmm. You gave me a job to do. I'm sorry you don't like the truth, right? And I'm like, oh my God. And then I was like, why did I just slam my hands down? But I was so frustrated with what was going on. Yeah. Like, I'm big on integrity. This has no integrity. What you're doing lacks integrity, and I can't be a part of that. So I'm giving you the truth. You don't like the truth. That doesn't mean that I'm not doing the job that I was put there. He wanted me to take the information and I was like, no. And I knew what was happening. I immediately printed off that document. And I hid it. I took it home with me every single night. Because it originated with me, and I was smart enough to know that it said that on the Excel spreadsheet that I made. That I was the originator of the document, and when he would go in to edit it, or if it was edited in any way, shape, or form that would be in the favor of us when we were doing something that lacked in, like that could screw my career up.
What was the outcome?
Oh, I didn't get to see the outcome.
You left.
I was moved to another account.
You were.
Yeah.
So then how did you get into IT in the first place? So
My mom worked for this major company, and it actually has been sold since then. My mom worked at EDS, Electronic Data Systems, which is an old Ross Perot company, IT consulting firm. And since then, we were sold to HP, and then HP, we split off into Perspecta and another company, but I don't remember what the other company is. But there's been a couple of different splits since then. Yeah. But my mom and EDS loved to hire a family, and there were a lot of parent-child employees there, and so she reached out, and the executive that I was hired by, his daughter was actually on the project that I moved to.
Okay.
And so I was already going to be hired. Like, I didn't even need to go to the interview.
Wow. All right. So then, Jeannie, tell me, when you said you had moved from Colorado to this job, it's just incredible. I mean, the series of events that happened in the process, it's mind-blowing.
Yeah.
But then, so you were a military spouse,
Yes.
and that's
So he went through the ROTC program.
your husband did.
Yes.
So tell us about that journey.
So I met him my first semester in college at Nova. He was finishing up his last semester because he did 2 years at Nova and then transferred in to the ROTC program at the university that he ended up going to, which was Radford. And so it was my very first semester, and we were in a psychology class together, and I know, and he was so cute. I'm not even gonna lie, he did not have beards or muscles or a tattoo.
It was so cute.
Yeah. And I was 18 and he had just turned 20.
Okay.
And somehow one of my friends knew one of his friends that he was in the class with, and he apparently had pointed me out and I didn't know, and all of a sudden, like the second or third class, they're now sitting behind us, and I was like, he's right there. Oh my gosh. Like I was and one day and we all walked out to our cars together.
Okay.
And he was I'm always the one that gets picked on. I'm never sure how that happens. And like a group of friends, I'll always be the one that somebody like is picking on, probably because I end up picking on them.
Right.
I'm not even pretend. And so I had my backpack on because school, and I was little, and so the loop that's on my backpack, he grabbed it and he kept pulling me back and just messing with me while we were walking. And of course I would take a couple of steps back and I'd look at him and just kind of be like, you're such a butthead. And that's how it kind of began. Something very cute and very innocent like that. And then we stayed a little longer in the parking lot and talked, and he gave me, we had pagers.
You have his pager number.
No, let me tell you how it worked. He gave me his number, and I was like, in my brain, my mom said, nice girls don't call boys. So being the Jeannie that I am, I was like, I said, wrote down, I was like, that's cool. And I took out a piece of paper and I wrote my number on it. And I handed it to him. And he was like, I'll call you.
Nice.
And I was like, oh, it worked. He must be a nice boy.
He must be a nice boy, Jeannie.
He must like me.
And your mom must have given you really great advice.
I was like, Mom. And I was never allowed to call a boy. Ever. Never. And I still keep to that. I ain't calling you. Not unless, like, we're in a super committed relationship, I ain't calling you.
Right.
I'm not doing it. Nice girls don't call boys.
Nice
It
girls
still
don't
stuck.
call boys.
It's still stuck. And that was told.
Yeah, some of the things that we'll probably have to like untrain.
Right, but I ain't calling a boy still.
Right.
I'm 32. I still am not calling a boy.
Not calling a boy.
But not unless we're in a really and then I'm comfortable and then I'll call you. Like, it's fine because then it's normal, right?
Yeah.
But at the very beginning, I will not be the first one that reaches out. That's me. Like,
and that's your value.
Yes.
And we all have them.
yes.
We all have them. Yeah.
Like, I need to understand that you're genuinely interested and I am not chasing you.
Yeah.
I'm not chasing you because I am, in my brain, I'm worth more than that. You need to show that interest.
And yes.
You need to reach out to me. You need to make sure that,
You have value.
for me,
yes.
that's something that is not that the great pretenders can't pretend that for a little bit, right? Because they can, and
yes.
it's happened.
Yes.
I've been fooled. But no, and it just kind of progressed from there, and then it was time for him he got his associates at Nova at the end of that semester and was moving on to Radford, and I decided to follow him.
So you
to
went
Radford.
Oh, so
I did not go to Radford. I went to community college down there, so I just ting ting ting.
Also, you
I had my
followed
own
him?
apartment. I had my own
Got
apartment. He had his own apartment, and not that he wasn't at my apartment like all the time, but like he came to my house.
Right.
I'm going to his.
So you transferred from community college here, and you went to
community college down there. Yeah.
And so how did the military come about?
So he went through the ROTC program. So he was commissioned as an officer after the 2 years at Radford, and he graduated. And so we were together that entire time, and I loved him.
So when did you guys get married?
Well, he went off to Armor Officer Basic course, which was at Fort Knox, Kentucky. He did that during that summer. And then he was commissioned as an officer, he got his duty station after graduating from his officer basic course in December. Yeah. He literally, he asked me to marry him on Labor Day. I probably should have taken that as a little offensive, Labor Day, really? But I didn't. He was just home. It was just how it worked. So he was home for that long weekend and asked me to marry him because I told him, I was like, I'm not going with you anywhere.
Yeah.
Out of this Commonwealth of Virginia as a girlfriend. Okay. Or as a fiance. We had, I was no way. And he was going to Colorado. He was going to Fort Carson.
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay. He came home and he was like, I can't imagine doing this without you with me. And I was like, yay. So I got a pretty dress and I got married at the church that I grew up in. And
how much longer after the day that he asked you did you get married?
December. So he asked me on Labor Day, which is the first
Monday in September.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And we got married December 23rd of 1999. So that's
same year.
I switched that stuff around. Yeah. He went changing his mind.
How long was he in Colorado then?
We were there for 4 years.
Wow. So then before he
So we moved. So we got married on the 23rd.
Yeah.
Christmas was on the 25th.
Yeah.
And we left on the 26th. No, we left on the 27th to go out to Colorado.
So he was going back to his duty station.
Well, he had never been there, so this is his first official duty station.
Got it.
So he chose. We sat down, even though we weren't engaged or anything like that. He said, "Where would you like to go?" Because he knew he was going to get his first choice because of his grades and all of his. We knew he was going to get first choice, whatever he chose to do.
Yeah.
And he got branch detail, which means he went armor and then MI, which is really hard to get. A lot of times they don't do that, but he had to do. The way it's set up when you do that in order to go to into MI the way he was, he had to have that. An armor or an infantry background.
Got it.
So, again, that's something that is rarely given, and he was given that. And he said, "Where would you like to go?" And I was like, "What are my choices?" And Colorado was one of the choices.
Wow.
And I wanted to live in Colorado. I loved Colorado.
I was just gonna ask you that.
Yeah.
Why didn't you stay there?
He got out, and
after the first 4 years.
Well, yeah, because we did. He did. He was up for. We did half of a deployment to Iraq. So he was one of the first who rolled in.
Got it.
And. So we did that. We did a deployment. It was not fun. We did half of it, and then he told me, he's like, I have to make a decision before I leave. So this was before he even left to go to Iraq. He's like, I have to make a decision before I leave as to whether or not I want to continue in the Army because my 4 years is coming up. My 4 years of active duty is coming up, and I need to make a decision. I was like, okay. And I said, I will support you with whatever. I gave my pros and cons of what I thought should happen, or my opinion. I said, ultimately, it's your career. I trust you to make the right decision. He made the decision of wanting to get out and do his last 4 years in reserves. And I was like, okay. But he had to do inactive reserves because of his specialty. He knew he would get called back up. And
I did inactive reserve.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so he did his, and there was a lot of guilt involved in that. It was
hard. It was hard for when we did it. We had when I did it, I had 2 small kids at the time. My husband stayed active.
0.
Yeah, and I had 2 little babies, and it was just super hard.
Yes.
Super hard.
I supported a lot of my friends there who had kids, and I almost became like their surrogate husband in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So then,
And ultimately, that was the demise of our marriage. That
What was?
began it. While he was gone, I made friends with a woman,
yeah.
and she and I became very close. She had 2 little kids, and I just adored them. And of course, he came back before anybody else did because his time was done.
Mm-hmm.
And so, about that time, her husband called her from Iraq and asked her for a divorce, and she fell apart. And I went to Corwin, or probably shouldn't have said his name, but whatever. Yeah, I went to him and I said, you know, she's really struggling, and I want to help her take care of the kids. Can they come and live with us? And he said, yeah, sure. Which wouldn't be abnormal of him. He went along with whatever little thing I came up with all the time.
Yeah, he trusts your decisions.
Yeah. And I did him, right?
Yeah.
Like we had that give and take.
Yeah.
And so, and I trusted him, and she came and lived with us. And my mom and dad came for, either it was Thanksgiving or Christmas. It must have been Thanksgiving. Maybe it was Christmas. I don't remember. One of those two. Probably Thanksgiving. And my mom looked at me and said, you need to get her out of your house. And I was like, Mom, what? You need to get her out of your house. And I was like, what are you talking about? She's a little too close to him.
So your husband was back by this time while she was living with you guys, or was she living with you before he came back?
After he came back, she came
was
back.
okay.
Yeah.
And she was going through her divorce.
Yeah.
And you got advice from your mom after they came to spend time with you to get her out of your house because your mom observed that she was too close to your husband.
Yeah. And you know, I was helping her take care of the kids. Basically, I was taking care of the kids. And my mom saw things she didn't like. And I was like, Mom, I trust him. Like, I trust him. It's fine. And she was like, I'm telling you now. And I was like, okay. And I just, you know, probably should have listened to my mom.
How long was she living with you by this time?
A couple of months.
Okay.
And I did her kids' entire Christmas. They were there with us on Christmas. I did their entire Christmas. I did all of it. I did her kids' birthdays. Yeah.
So so what happened?
So, once he got out and was officially out, he got a civilian job. So we moved to Lexington, Kentucky for 6 months. And we were in the process of selling our house in Colorado because we did buy a house out there. Because we wanted to stay there. Like that was really the goal. And so we moved to Kentucky, and I was, you know, I didn't get a job during that time. I would go in and help in the office where he was working and things like that, but I didn't get a job because it was such a short amount of time, and we knew we weren't going to stay in Lexington. And then it was time to move. Once we moved back to this area, it all just kind of fell into my lap. You know, you find out things you don't want to find out. And one day, the phone rang at our house.
In Virginia.
Well, we were living in Maryland, but yeah, we were in
this area.
So my phone rang at our house, and I answered it. Well, first of all, I had just come in from going grocery shopping, and he was watching TV, and I came in and I was sitting on his lap and telling him like, oh, I got this, and this, we're gonna have this, you know, just having a normal conversation. Well, the phone rang. He never answered the phone. He could have cared less about the phone. And he jumped up so fast that like I fell on the floor.
Oh wow.
And I was like, what are you doing? Like, and I mean, what are you doing? And he couldn't get through the phone fast enough, so he turned off the answer machine that was right there. And by this time, I'm standing up, literally standing up on the couch like I'm 3, right? And I'm standing up on the couch, I'm like, what are you doing? And he was like, oh, it's my brother-in-law. he wants me to come over there. I don't want to go over there. And I did my head and I went, huh. So I jumped off the couch. I took off up the steps and went to the phone that was upstairs on the middle floor.
Yeah.
And I answered it and I said, hello. And they hung up on me, the person on the other line. So then I looked at the caller ID and it was a female's name and it was a female that he worked with. And I said, why is she calling on a Sunday afternoon? And why are you throwing me on the floor and turning the answer machine? Like,
Yeah.
What are you doing? And that snowballed into hours worth of conversations about her, and my temper took over. And
Who was she?
a girl that he worked with.
In the Maryland area?
Well, she worked in their corporate offices in Ohio, but they would travel to some different locations that they were opening up like once a month or so, and he would be there for like a week and help them stand up that operation.
So did the conversation ever came back to the lady you were helping in Colorado?
Oh yeah, because that's what sparked me looking at his phone records in order to see what was going on. And when I did that, then I saw her number on there as well. So I saw my friend's number on there as well, and it was hours. He would talk to her hours every day.
All right, let me just backtrack. When did you? When this started? When this happened? How long have you been gone from Colorado?
At that point, it was probably a year and a couple of months.
And he'd been talking to her during that entire time?
Because I went all the way back. No, I wasn't dumb. I went all the way back.
Further back.
I went all the way back.
Were there? So what did you discover?
Even while we were in Colorado and Kentucky and then in Maryland, when he would go to these different jobs, not only was he meeting the woman that worked
In the corporate office?
but also her.
In Colorado?
She would fly to wherever he was.
What did you discover about their relationship?
Oh, it was an affair. It was two
cheating.
affairs, yeah.
He was cheating with this, the Colorado lady, who was going through a divorce.
And at that point, the divorce was final for her.
And Ohio lady.
Yeah.
And
our relationship was normal. And we were trying to have a baby. I didn't, but we were trying to. And I was still friends with my friend from Colorado. She knew everything that was happening. She came out and visited us in Kentucky and when we lived in Maryland.
And you saw nothing, no red flags during those visits?
No, because I trusted him.
Did you see red flags? When looking back now, do you think you could recall anything that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, like, he minimalized it a lot. Like, oh, well, I think of her as my sister, right? To give me comfort. I didn't think that she would be his type because I was young. So, like, when you look at us, we're two opposite people. Even if you look at our personalities, like, our personalities are very opposite. And so I was like, well, plus we had been together forever. Like, I trusted him. I didn't necessarily trust her, but I trusted him.
So what happened after you discovered?
I highlighted it in 2 different colors. I was Betty. Yeah, I highlighted 2 different colors. One was Ohio, one was my friend in Colorado. And I only gave him the Ohio stuff first. At dinner. I made him dinner that night. And I passed it across the table. I said, can you tell me who's highlighted, whose numbers? He was like, Jean, come on. Like, I was like, and of course he wouldn't answer. And I was like, okay. Then, and I pulled out the next page and I was like, So could you tell me why there are two different colors on this page?
Yeah.
Well, we were talking about you the whole time. I said, I did not have enough going on in my life for you to be talking about me for 6 hours a day.
Wow.
Yeah. And it was me. And well, why didn't you tell me? Well, because you would be mad at me. Why would I be mad at you? That doesn't make any sense.
So how long did this period last before the next steps happened?
If a couple of months, very short amount of time. I wasn't going to live like that, and I suggested counseling. I begged him, literally, hands and knees begged him,
Yeah.
please go to counseling with me. He refused to go to counseling. And when I made the decision that I was going to move, I found my own apartment here in Manassas to move to. I moved.
You are in Maryland, and what did that look like for you, Jeannie? Like, what did...
Chaos inside.
Okay.
It was chaos. Because you're talking about the man that I adored. Like, I worshipped him. He was my real live hero. Like, he was everything to me. Only man that I had ever had a real, relationship with. That was it. He consumed my entire adult life. Like, who am I? If I'm not your wife, who am I? If I'm not with you, then who am I? I had no idea, and I was like 26 years old. I had no idea, 25, 26.
Jeannie, there's so much. I'm thinking about it in ways that I am mentally, hearing you, and I'm seeing you now, and I just find it to be so courageous, because there are so many women who are going through that right now.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And for me to say that I was divorced was so shameful. Now I'm like, why was I so worried about telling people that I was divorced? I had so much shame associated with that. Like, I would whisper it. Like, you know what I mean? It was so hard. It was so hard to say that. Now I'm like, hey, I've been divorced 3 times.
But tell me, Jeannie, talk this out with me. You like you said, you were with him, and there not only was just love, but there was an attachment, a dependence, a loss of self in the relationship. So to try to pull and go in and dissect those parts, to rediscover you, to get the strength to make a decision to go on your... what does that look like?
I just knew if he wasn't going to go to counseling, how could we fix it? When he looked at me and said, no, I can't, it's too hard. That was everything I needed to know.
How did you find the courage to act next?
I didn't feel like I had another choice. It was either stay...
Which a lot of people do.
Yes, and I have been the stayer, right? Like, in my last marriage, I was just gonna stay until my kids were older. Like, that was my plan. Until I couldn't ignore it anymore, and then I had to do something. But in this case, I knew that I wanted a family. I knew that I loved him, but with everything that I had. But if you don't want to do this, how do we go any further? I saw no way to move forward if we didn't. I had no... He tied my hands when he said he wouldn't go to counseling and that it was too hard. He tied my hands. I had no other choice. And in that moment, I realized, I told myself, don't you ever get on your knees and beg anyone for anything ever again.
You've been listening to part 1 of a 2-part series of Awakening the Warriors podcast with Jeannie Kidwell as our special guest. Our podcast is produced and directed by Ryan Robin. Please remember to follow us on Facebook at Awakening the Warriors, also on Instagram at Awakening the Warriors. Remember that you are always able to join our private Facebook group by the same name, Awakening the Warriors. There you will join many other women who are courageously sharing their stories and are being supported by other women who are also on a journey to explore healing, discover passion, and pursue purpose. Thank you for joining us, and tune in next week to hear part 2 of Jeannie Kidwell's